Coming up on New Day at Arirang, South Korea staring down the barrel at another day with well over 2,000 new COVID-19 cases. The vaccination push continues, but rising fast. The number of breakthrough infections. The US and China agree in principle for President Biden to hold a virtual meeting with Xi Jinping in the next several weeks. The tentative deal coming after a meeting in Switzerland between Biden's top national security aide and China's top diplomat. Plus, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry goes to two scientists who made a tool for building molecules. The technique can be used in everything from new drugs to parts for solar panels. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Well, hello and welcome to this Thursday edition of New Day at Arirang. It's 8 a.m. on October 7th here in Seoul, South Korea. Thank you ever so much for joining us. I'm Mark Brew.
And I'm Kim Mo-gen. Over the next hour, we'll take a look at the big news stories of the day and get expert insights on the issues facing Korea and the world. We start with the COVID-19 crisis that continues to grip the country.
It certainly does. It's the virus that refuses to loosen its grip on the country, unfortunately, like many other countries around the world. And ahead of another three-day holiday, which starts on Friday, tomorrow, South Korea is set to see another daily caseload above 2,000. Perhaps it could be well in excess of that.
Yes, that's right. And for more on this, we have Arirang's Choi Won-jong here in the studio with us. Morning, Won-jong.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Now, Won-jong, the South Korean health authorities will officially announce today's COVID-19 infection toll. And but based on what we've seen last night, how are things looking so far?
So today's number of COVID-19 cases in South Korea will once again rise above 2,000 mark. As far as cases go, from midnight to 9 p.m. on Wednesday, 2,101 cases were reported. That's 230 cases more than at the same time on the previous day. Among local infections, over 76% were from the greater Seoul area, but again, this could change in the next 2 hours or so. However, compared to the same period a week ago, to be precise, the figure has decreased by 143.
Won-jong, also from today, people who've been fully vaccinated in countries other than South Korea can show proof of vaccination while they are here. Tell us more about that.
So that is actually correct. A lot of people who've gotten their the COVID-19 vaccines outside of Korea have found it very difficult to prove their inoculation status when visiting coffee shops and restaurants, meaning they weren't eligible for vaccine incentives. Kicking off Thursday, those who come to Korea with the quarantine exemption document can prove their inoculation status, meaning they are now able to participate in the vaccine incentives. They can register their information online using apps like Kuv at local health centers. They will help travelers inoculate abroad, and U.S. soldiers stationed in Korea prove their vaccination status. However, it only applies to vaccines that are approved by the WHO.
Now, Won-jong, despite COVID-19 infections continuing across the country, South Korea's health authorities have reaffirmed their plan to bring back things to normal as soon as possible. Can you tell us more on that?
So this happened actually yesterday, which is the Wednesday here in South Korea. So the Korean health authorities are going all out to prepare the so-called Living with the COVID-19 plan and the gradual return to normal. Looking at several details provided, the authorities said that they're focusing on the country's vaccination rate, adding that the ideal rate for the transition is when 70% of the country's total population is vaccinated, meaning 80% of adults and 90% of senior citizens. However, the authorities said they are concerned over the current infection rates, projecting that daily infections could top 5,000 in the late October. That's the same period that they had expected to begin transition back to normal life.
So in order to do that, though, the authorities want to see a much lower rate in terms of new daily infections, as well as more people with immunity from COVID-19 for that to happen. Is this booster shot that's coming for certain people in society likely to help what they're terming this gradual return to normalcy at all?
Right, so that is a good point. I do think so. As you know, the health authorities have started taking vaccine reservation for booster shots for those groups who are exposed to higher risk of catching mostly COVID-19. Yeah.
And who's eligible for these additional shots?
So since October 5th, those in their 60s and most medical workers have been applying for their booster jab. They're getting an mRNA vaccine from either Pfizer or Moderna. To clarify this a little bit more, if you've previously got the Pfizer vaccine for all doses, you'll get another Pfizer shot. And if you had 2 doses of Moderna shot, your extra shot will also be from Moderna. However, if you were administered with AstraZeneca's vaccine, you will still receive either Pfizer or Moderna.
So naturally that leads to the question, if someone watching had the AstraZeneca shot first,
Right.
then got the Pfizer shot, which a great many people have had that combination.
That is correct, yeah.
What are they going to get for this third booster shot?
So that's a lot of people actually question about. So you will still get either Pfizer or Moderna's vaccine, and the booster shot for Janssen, actually, some of them actually got the Janssen vaccine, but that has not been decided yet, so we'll see what happens after all. But I also want to point out that research said that effectiveness of Pfizer vaccine says 11 times higher for preventing the infections and 19 times higher for preventing severe cases compared to those who didn't have the extra shot. So that's a big news.
Well, thank you very much, Won-jong, for your report. So potentially people could have an AstraZeneca, a Pfizer and a Moderna shot floating around their system, under this system. Thank you ever so much for your report, and we'll see you again on Friday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, for a more in-depth expert discussion on COVID-19, let's turn to our Daily Corner On Point, where we speak to experts in their field to dig deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight. Like we've mentioned before, there was kind of a temporarily lull, wasn't there, in new daily COVID-19 infections. However, as we've been reporting over the past 48 hours or so, South Korea again topped 2,000 new cases on Wednesday, and it appears to be on course to post similar numbers, if not higher, on Thursday.
Despite the toughest level of social distancing remaining in place for weeks in the capital area, as well as more and more people being vaccinated by the day, the number continues to be stubbornly high. Now, for more on the situation, we have Dr. Alice Tan, internist at Ms. Midi Women's Hospital, joining us on Skype. Dr. Tan, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we're seeing an uptick as a result of the recent 3-day weekend. The problem is we have another starting tomorrow, and people naturally want to move around during that time. Do you foresee this double whammy leading to a post-Chuseok situation where we're seeing daily cases exceeded 3,000 again?
Yes, unfortunately, I do anticipate that the number of positive cases will increase, not just because of the series of holidays that started with the Chuseok holiday, but because the virus is becoming so widespread in the Seoul metro area, but also throughout the country. The KDCA reported that over the month of September, even though the number of daily average cases increased, the number of identified clusters went down from 103 to only 33. At the same time, the number of cases that were detected that were within the epidemiological surveillance network decreased to below 30%. And the number of cases of unknown epidemiological link now is almost 12,000. So unless there is a huge testing campaign to detect all of the thousands of people who are positive but still in the community, I don't see that the number of cases will actually meaningfully go down.
Yeah, tracing has always been a huge problem for South Korea, as well as many other countries around the world. But South Korea, as we just heard from our Chair Won-jong before, will start giving booster shots to certain groups from this month. And South Korea will be joining several other countries. They all have their different policies, of course. But South Korea is not going to give booster shots to everyone, at least for now. The WHO, though, says that richer countries like South Korea, the United States, etc., should actually wait for poorer nations to give first and second shots to their populations before going ahead with this. Where exactly do you stand on this issue?
I do agree with the WHO in part. I think it's important for Korea to start administering booster shots to the elderly of the country. During September, the number of cases who were greater than 60 years old went up by 75%. And that's simply not a tenable situation. We do need to protect our elders. We also need to protect our healthcare workers who were given the vaccine early on. There's evidence that immunity may be waning now, and so we do need to protect our healthcare workers because once infections start in the healthcare worker population, that can lead to spread of the infection in hospitals. And if we have a decrease in the number of healthcare workers who are able to work because they're in quarantine, that can have very devastating downstream effects. So I don't think we should be giving boosters to all low-risk groups because, of course, that will lead to a shortage, an increased shortage of vaccines available throughout the world. That will only make the situation worse. It's a self-defeating policy to do that. But I think that vaccinating our elders and high-risk healthcare workers with boosters is a good policy that we do need to pursue.
Mm-hmm. Now, breakthrough cases are exploding, topping a fifth of all cases in the last week of September. South Korea isn't the only country seeing this. Has it reached a point where regular COVID-19 booster shots are the norm like the flu? And as a follow-up to that, do you think it's time to stop labeling this a pandemic and admit it's an endemic?
Well, I think it's both. I mean, it's still a pandemic, but as you're saying, it is an endemic disease. COVID-19 is not going to disappear for at least several years into the future. And I think what we need to do is continue with our strong vaccination campaign. On the other hand, it's very important to also have a strong surveillance network for genetic mutations so that we can stay on top of genetic mutations and make sure that our vaccines and our therapeutics are well targeted against the genetic strains that are prevalent. And this is going forward for the next several years, I think the policy that we need to pursue. We have some antiviral therapeutics that are in development in the pipeline, and hopefully they will be released soon. But usually with antiviral medications, it takes a little bit of time, and then there's resistance that the virus can develop. And so that's where the surveillance and the constant development of new antivirals to protect against the emerging strains, that's where that point becomes very important.
And finally, Doctor, to a question that's really been on a great many parents' minds, including myself. The South Korean government says minors between the ages of 12 and 17, providing they have their parents' consent, can be vaccinated soon. However, it must be said that there is a CDC study out there that shows COVID-19 has killed a negligible number of otherwise healthy children. Do you really think it's necessary to vaccinate young kids against a virus which studies have shown the overwhelming majority, providing they are healthy and don't have any comorbidities, recover quickly from in many, many cases? And if you don't agree with that and believe they should be vaccinated, why exactly do you think that way?
Well, there are two reasons why I strongly support vaccination in children. First of all, we don't know the full picture of what COVID-19 does to children. We think they've recovered fully, but this is a new disease. We don't know if perhaps there will be sequelae that we discover months or years down the line. The other reason is, we already vaccinate our children for against about a dozen other infectious diseases, such as hepatitis A, hepatitis B, chickenpox, diphtheria. And the reason why is not only because vaccinations save lives, but also because vaccinations help prevent deafness, also liver failure, other outcomes that are not necessarily fatal. The other reason is because COVID-19 is so infectious, we want to prevent the circulation of this virus in schools, in groups. Our children spend so much time in congregate settings. And the virus could circulate in these settings, and then from there be passed on to vulnerable adults. And so this is a situation that we want to prevent. I mean, COVID-19 has caused such a disruption to our children's education and had a negative impact on their well-being. Vaccination really is the way to protect them and to make sure that they can stay safe and enjoy their childhoods again.
Dr. Tan, we again appreciate your insights about this health crisis. We look forward to speaking with you again soon. That was Dr. Alice Tan, internist at Midi Women's Hospital, on South Korea's fight against the virus.
Now, with tension simmering between Washington and Beijing, President Biden and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping are likely to have a virtual meeting in the coming weeks.
The deal was a result of a meeting between the U.S. National Security Council advisor and a top Chinese diplomat. The high-profile talks in Switzerland on Wednesday were intended to improve communication between the world's two superpowers. But whether it proved successful remains unclear for now. Kim Sang-min reports.
U.S. President Joe Biden and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping are expected to hold a virtual bilateral meeting before the end of this year. That's according to a senior U.S. official on Wednesday who said an agreement in principle for the virtual meeting has been reached between the two countries. The official added that the presidential meeting was proposed after Biden mentioned that he would like to be able to see Xi again during their phone call last month. Details on the meeting are yet to be worked out. The tentative agreement came after a 6-hour meeting between White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and China's top diplomat Yang Jiechi in Zurich on Wednesday. The central goal of the meeting was to improve communications amid rising tensions between the two countries over the issue of Taiwan. Beijing sent record-high numbers of warplanes into Taiwan's airspace in the past week, prompting sharp warnings from Washington. According to a White House statement regarding Wednesday's meeting, Sullivan emphasized the need to maintain open lines of communication while raising concerns about China's recent military provocations against Taiwan. China's human rights abuses against ethnic minorities and Beijing's stances on Hong Kong were also on the agenda. The U.S. also vowed to continuously engage with Beijing at a senior level. The meeting served as a follow-up to Biden's call with Xi last month, where Biden stressed the need to manage competition between the nations in a responsible manner. Kim Sang-min, Arirang News.
South Korea's Foreign Minister Chung Eui-yong has held talks with his counterparts from France, Hungary, and Luxembourg. Seoul's foreign ministry said Chung met ministers from the three countries in Paris on Wednesday at the meeting of the OECD Council at ministerial level. They discussed ways to strengthen cooperation and tackle global issues like climate change and COVID-19. The meeting kicked off Tuesday under the theme Shared Values, Building a Green and Inclusive Future, with the U.S. as chair and South Korea and Luxembourg as vice chairs. The South Korean military is shoring up its deterrence strategies against North Korea's missile threats. The foreign ministry in Seoul is also urging the North to arrange talks to ensure a cross-border military agreement that was signed a number of years ago is followed through upon. Our Kim Dami reports.
Seoul will further beef up its deterrence strategies against North Korea's nuclear missile threats while strengthening its attack and missile defense capabilities. In a report for the annual parliamentary audit on Wednesday, South Korea's Joint Chief of Staff said the North continues to bolster its nuclear and missile capabilities. In order to draw up new strategies against the threats, the JCS said the military is reassessing the security situation on the Korean peninsula to take into consideration the results of the regime's party congress in January and U.S.-China tensions. As a part of its 5-year plan, Pyongyang test-fired 4 missile launches just last month, including a newly developed anti-aircraft missile. Also on Wednesday, South Korea's first Vice Foreign Minister Sejong urged the North to return to dialogue immediately to carry out the inter-Korean military agreement. Regarding Seoul's offer to declare an end of war with Pyongyang, Choi highlighted at a forum that the two Koreas need to build a future order for peace on the peninsula, starting with the declaration. Choi then noted it is a time for the two sides to ask and answer one another through open dialogue. While the North has remained unresponsive to Washington's overtures, a former U.S. intelligence official said on Tuesday that the North is likely waiting to hear from the U.S. that it's committed to an action-for-action approach toward the North's complete denuclearization. Noting that the North was still in a, quote, low-key, Andrew Kim, former founding director of the CIA's Korea Mission Center, said Pyongyang is expected to focus on domestic politics in South Korea for the next few months, ahead of South Korea's presidential election set to take place in March. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
Iran expects the resumption of nuclear talks in Vienna soon, following messages and signals from Western countries, including the U.S., to kickstart talks. Speaking in Moscow Wednesday following a meeting with his Russian counterpart, Tehran's foreign minister said Iran is now in the final stages of consultations on the matter, adding talks could even start in the coming days. However, there's no specific date for resuming stalled negotiations to revive the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. The Iranian diplomat added that until Tehran returns to talks, all other parties must show their will for successful talks while also fulfilling their own commitments.
The International Monetary Fund is forecasting consumer price inflation to peak in the fall before dropping to pre-pandemic levels by mid-2022. However, the IMF warned on Wednesday that a shortage-driven inflation spike could prove persistent. It cited rising housing prices and prolonged supply shortages in advanced and developing economies, as well as currency depreciations in emerging markets. The IMF sees inflation in advanced economies peaking at 3.6% before declining to around 2% by the middle of next year. Emerging and developing economies will see inflation decline to around 4% next year after peaking at 6.8%. The world's largest memory chip maker, South Korea's Samsung Electronics, has unveiled its technology roadmap for its foundry business division. Samsung plans to become the world's first player to mass produce 3-nanometer chips by the first half of next year. The firm adds that it will be able to mass produce even smaller nanometer chips in around 4 years from now. Kim Hyo-sun with this report.
South Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics has revealed its goal of becoming the world's first company to mass-produce next-generation 3-nanometer chips, deploying gate-all-around technology in the first half of 2022. The technology refers to a modified transistor structure where the gate contacts the channel from all 4 sides for better control of current flow and further scaling. This was announced on Wednesday during the Samsung Foundry Forum 2021 held online under the theme of Adding One More Dimension, where the company announced its future tech plans. Samsung also expressed confidence in its foundry business, which it says will be able to mass-produce 2-nanometer chips in 2025. Samsung also introduced its upgraded FinFET-based 17-nanometer process with the aim to deliver more cost-efficient and applicable products. FinFET, or Thin-Field Effect Transistor, refers to a transistor with a 3D structure. In November, the company says it will hold the Samsung Advanced Foundry Ecosystem Forum virtually. The forum explains that it will serve as an opportunity for Samsung to beef up relations with its partners and clients around the world. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Now, President Moon Jae-in has placed a personal order for a new mini SUV produced by Hyundai Motor. It's not any old car either. It's the first produced at a factory in the southwestern city of Gwangju under his administration's job creation campaign. Our presidential office correspondent Kim Min-ji with the details.
President Moon Jae-in and First Lady Kim Jong-suk on Wednesday took a spin in their new mini SUV, a car which was produced under the Moon administration's job creation campaign. Moon had placed a pre-order for the Hyundai Casper last month. The president was quoted as saying that the car looks sturdy and spacious despite being compact in size. The mini SUV is the first car produced by Gwangju Global Motors, a joint venture between Hyundai Motor and the Gwangju city government in the country's southwest. Local unions, management, the private and public sectors signed a so-called win-win agreement in 2019. Dubbed Gwangju-style job creation, it is one of 8 projects across the country that aims to revitalize the local economy and create jobs, especially for young people. Gwangju Global Motors manufactures vehicles outsourced by Hyundai, while the city government provided over 600,000 square meters of land for the plant. The local government, along with the central government, also provides welfare benefits for the employees to make up for their relatively lower wages, which are around half the average pay that a manufacturing worker would get at Hyundai Motor. President Moon plans to use the car within the presidential compound initially and after his term ends next year. Minji, Arirang News.
Now it's time for Global Insight with our Oh Soo-young in the studio, who connects with experts around the world to get an in-depth analysis on major stories.
Thanks very much for the intro, Morgan. Now it's time for Global Insight today, where we discuss the National Assembly's recent vote to open a regional branch of parliament in Sejong City, some 140 kilometers south of Seoul. The planned city was established 14 years ago, the brainchild of former President Roh Moo-hyun, who envisioned an administrative capital that would host the day-to-day workings of government and national politics. The decentralisation idea, however, has been slow-moving and politically contentious, with the Constitutional Court declaring a move away from Seoul unconstitutional. And only a limited number of government ministries, cabinet bodies and other agencies moved to Sejong a decade ago. However, with soaring housing prices in the Seoul capital area and the National Assembly last week passing a bill to partially relocate by 2027, the decentralisation plan appears to have gained traction again. So can the city of Sejong become the Washington, D.C. of South Korea? To answer this question, we have joining us today Lee Hyun, Associate Dean and Professor of Law at Handong International Law School, and Cho Won-hyuk, Senior Lecturer of Public Management at the Victoria University of Wellington. It's lovely to see you both this morning. Thank you very much for joining us. And
good morning.
Quite exciting plans for 2027 by the National Assembly. And starting with you, Professor Lee. Now, the Sejong relocation plan, it was first discussed 20 years ago, and the bill on the plan was actually introduced 5 years ago. So it's been a source of political debate, and it's been quite difficult to move things along. So why do lawmakers feel that this is the right time to take action on partially relocating the National Assembly to the city of Sejong?
Right. Well, yeah, as you mentioned before, there was this whole process has been slow moving, and there was great opposition initially to the plan by the opposition party. And as you mentioned earlier, also, there was the Constitutional Court made the ruling that it was unconstitutional to move the capital, since the Constitution declared that Seoul to be the capital city from basically early on in the Joseon Dynasty. But I think recently the dynamics have changed because, of course, there's a presidential election that's going to occur in March of next year. And so the opposition party has also moved along and been supportive of the sort of recent efforts to move the capital, at least significant portions of the government apparatus, to Sejong City. So I think what you're seeing is the confluence of a number of factors, but primarily the political dynamic of the presidential election. And I think the opposition party really wants to appeal to voters in the Chungcheong province areas.
And Professor Cho, after the vote passed last week, National Assembly Speaker Park Bong-seok, he said that the partial relocation is going to help raise national competitiveness for South Korea and also foster balanced regional development. Would you agree with that?
I generally support the idea of relocating the National Assembly to Sejong because it is just more efficient in that way. Central government workers can work more closely with the National Assembly branch in Sejong with some proximity without having to travel too much. But that's pretty much it. This relocation of National Assembly has almost nothing to do with national competitiveness or regionally balanced development, in my opinion. Decades of international research show that both national and regional competitiveness in general are driven by the capacity of industry to innovate. Of course, quality of government or well-functioning democracy are certainly important factors in national or regional development, but simply relocating the physical space of policy decision-making does not guarantee the success of the development project. The Administrative Capital City project in South Korea kick-started its implementation back in 2012 to 2014. So it has been almost 10 years. And nearly 300 government agencies left Seoul a long time ago. And look what has happened for the last 10 years. Seoul is dominating in terms of competitiveness and economic growth. For example, almost every single year since 2014, the regional GDP growth of Seoul has outperformed the rest of the country, including Busan, Daejeon, Daegu, Jeolla Province, and Gyeongsang Province. Professor Lee mentioned about Chungcheong Province. Chungcheong Province may be the only exception. But it is clear the relocation doesn't necessarily mean better regional economy. Again, the relocation of the National Assembly to Sejong can definitely improve the efficiency of the decision-making process. However, policymakers should be aware that this is not the holy grail of all the problems. Therefore, all kinds of realistic assessments and cautions need to be taken into account.
And Professor Cho, it looks like they need to do exactly just that, really, over the next few years, because they've agreed to relocate, but they haven't really pinned down the necessary details just yet. So how big do you think the Sejong branch needs to be? How should its functions be divided? And the most important question of all, who gets to stay in Seoul and who has to go?
That's a very difficult question, Soo-young. As far as I know, from government source documents and media reports, it seems that they are going to choose one of three different scenarios regarding who stays in Seoul and who goes to Sejong. Let's focus on the most likely scenario. That scenario is that around 10 to 12 standing committees and the Special Committee on Budget and Account, the National Assembly Secretariat, the Budget Office, and the National Assembly Research Service will go to Sejong. Again, this is just a scenario one, and no one knows yet about what would actually happen, but it is the most likely scenario. Therefore, it seems that they could relocate at least 2/3 of the National Assembly's function, and this means the relocation of around 3,000 to 5,000 employees. About what should happen, not what's likely to happen, I have an unpopular opinion, which is that everyone could end up in Sejong. And the simple reason for this view is that it is just more cost efficient. The estimated cost of relocating the National Assembly is around $850 million. And you almost always end up spending more than the estimated cost in this kind of project. So if you're going to spend that much amount of taxpayers' money, why do you still want to keep certain functions in Seoul, which would only increase maintenance costs and travel expenses? I don't see the point of doing that.
I see, and while the ruling party certainly has been talking about expanding other branches of the state as well, and Professor Lee, all three branches of the state, they would, under the ruling party's plan, need to move to Sejong at some point in order to establish the city as an administrative capital. What do you think this transition is going to look like, and do you think it's possible?
Well, I think it was already mentioned by the professor that his suggestion, of course, moving everyone to Sejong is a potential situation. Unlikely, however, but I agree with him in terms of the efficiency aspect, certainly a cost-saving measure to move everyone to Sejong. But I think the difficulty there, of course, is that you're talking about three branches of government, of course. And you have the National Assembly, of course, represents the legislature. You have the Cheongwade, of course, and the executive agencies like the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Justice, and then lastly, the judiciary. You have the Supreme Court as well as the Constitutional Court. And the question about moving these institutions down to Sejong, of course, is a huge decision, because when it comes, for example, to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, if you move them to Sejong, and including maybe the executive branch, Cheongwade too, the embassies will also have to move to Sejong to be closer to the ministry in terms of their consultations regarding Korea relations with other countries. Not to mention, of course, the Constitutional Court and the Supreme Court. You have law firms, lawyers that service those courts, as well as personnel. And all those offices, as well as related institutions, as well as businesses and other sectors, will have to move to Sejong as well. So the effect of this, of course, is to not just move government agencies and government apparatuses, but also to move people down to Sejong that are related to those government agencies. And so while this may have the desired effect, of course, of what the administration wants in terms of balanced development, I agree with the sentiments earlier made by the professor that industry really needs to move, and businesses where productive capacities will be able to be increased. So this is really, I have mixed feelings about it in relationship to this idea of development, but certainly in terms of moving the capital itself, it can be done. It'll be expensive, but it will take a complex transition.
And Professor Cho, you did slightly mention your thoughts on the cost efficiency of the move to Sejong, but while the proponents of the move, they've cited time travel and expenses of going back and forth that end up costing the taxpayer as all the more reason to partially relocate to Sejong. But if efficiency and saving money is the objective, then why not simply invest in better video conferencing facilities, for instance, in this period of Zoom meetings? Do you think the partial relocation is going to reap sufficient benefits?
That is actually a great point, Sejong. Thank you very much. So South Korea has excellent broadband infrastructure and top-level high-speed internet. So why not use it for video conferencing and virtual meetings? Yes, that sounds reasonable, but it is easier said than done, because you also have to change workplace culture in government bureaucracy and strongly set up routines and practices in the National Assembly. South Korean government has, of course, tried it before, which is called smart work system. Again, back to the relocation project season 1 in 2012 and 2014. The whole relocation project cost more than $20 billion US, and significant amount of that money was invested in building video conferencing facilities and cloud-based or web-based work routines. But this smart work system has been largely underused. Technologies like video conferencing or flex work centers are viewed as some kind of violation of Korea's traditional work values. A recent study shows that more than 80% of government employees report that the organizational culture is the biggest barrier in using video conferencing and remote work technology. Another issue is complexity of using the technology due to the security features. Security features are there for good reasons, especially for government sector, but it makes it more inconvenient to use. As a result, every single year, the government is spending around $20 million to pay for business trips within the country, often just to have a simple meeting that can be done online. That's a lot of money. But after the outbreak of COVID-19, we do see some changes. More people work remotely and more meetings are held online. But still, we are far from replacing face-to-face meetings entirely with video conferencing, and I think it will take quite a long time to change that.
And well, Professor Lee, it seems that the ruling party has been pushing for the relocation plan to go through, also in the last-ditch attempt to cool the skyrocketing housing prices in Seoul. But property prices have also been soaring in Sejong City. So do you think instead of really diffusing the situation in Seoul, do you think it's rather going to fan the flames in Sejong?
Right. Well, I think the difficulty there with the housing market, of course, is that you've had recent reports that the housing prices have soared actually in the last 6 months, and there's no sign of any cooling down. Now, this bubble will eventually burst at some point, but I think given the proclivities of the Korean consumer, investors, whenever you see a new opportunity to invest, and particularly Sejong is prime for this, you're going to have people who are going to buy up housing, and with the thought of not necessarily living there, but of course seeing it as an investment opportunity. And I think this current administration has really had some difficulty dealing with the overall issue of housing generally. I think in terms of the housing market, you see now a lot of lower cost and medium cost housing now becoming much more expensive. because of the overall shortage in the number of units that are available in the Seoul metropolitan area. But of course, because Sejong is a new city, housing keeps developing and new apartment buildings are being built. And so people see that, of course, as a prime opportunity to then invest. I think the current administration needs to, of course, get a better handle on this problem. Of course, this has been a problem that's plagued the Moon administration for quite some time. And I think the scandals over the years with respect to even government officials speculating on property, on inside information has not, of course, helped the problem. But this is, I think, an issue that is going to be long-term. I don't think this is like a question that's going to be developed or helped with Sejong or more housing being developed. I think it has to do with an overall attitude, of course, the Korean consumer investor with respect to how money is used and circulated within the economy. And so I'm not sure that the Sejong situation will help the situation. I think this housing crisis will continue for quite some time and really will be up to the next administration to put a better handle on housing and prices in general.
And well, the idea of creating an administrative city of its own, it's also been quite a challenge because, well, every weekend you see civil servants just flocking to the train station, just desperate to get away from the city and go back to Seoul for the weekend. And well, it's something like a scene from a war movie, an evacuation scene. And well, Professor Cho, what do you think needs to be done to make Sejong City more livable and a place that people want to stay rather than evacuate at the end of every work week?
Livability of Sejong is certainly an issue. Studies have shown that livable communities are places where people feel safe, healthy, and socially connected. Also, people want to live in places where it is clean, environmentally friendly, and where there is something to sit on and something to look at. A recent survey conducted last June shows that still more than 34% of relocated Korean public servants commute long distance every day because they don't like the city as a place to live. And if you are married with children, it is much more likely that you don't relocate your family to Sejong from Seoul. Studies have shown that long, unsafe, and inconvenient commutes have negative impacts on mental health as well as on productivity. In another recent survey, research found that people in Sejong think housing quality is actually good in Sejong. However, this study also found that transportation infrastructure is really bad and very inconvenient in Sejong. They also found cultural amenities are poor and medical services are not great in the city. On top of that, it is getting more and more expensive to live in Sejong. Professor Lee just mentioned about the housing bubbles and housing prices, not just in Sejong or Seoul, but maybe it will be even more expensive if this National Assembly relocation creates a bubbly real estate market in Sejong. So among these factors of livability here, there are things that you cannot really do much about, especially in the short run, but there are also things that you can design well to promote some of these important aspects of lifestyle, and that is, I think, the transportation.
Well, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. That was Hyun Lee, Associate Dean and Professor of Law at Handong International Law School, and Won-Yok Cho, Senior Lecturer of Public Management at Victoria University of Wellington. Thank you both so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Glitz and glamour were on full display on Wednesday night in Busan. The stars and world-famous directors hit the red carpet for the opening of the Busan International Film Festival. Our Kim Bo-kyung was there and files us this report.
The 26th Busan International Film Festival officially got underway on Wednesday with the opening ceremony held at the outdoor theater of the Busan Cinema Center, co-hosted by well-known actors Song Joong-ki and Park So-dam. Unlike last year, the festival has in-person opening and closing ceremonies, as well as a red carpet event. Though only half of the theater seats are available, the festival will screen each film 2 or 3 times across 29 screens in 6 theaters, and strict virus prevention measures in place. All visitors and participants are required to show that they are fully vaccinated or have tested negative for COVID-19 in the past 3 days. This year, a total of 223 films from 70 countries are going to be screened, and the programmers who selected the movies say the lineup surpasses expectations.
All films from 3 representative film festivals, Cannes, Berlin, and Venice, are here, including Titan, which won Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival, Drive My Car, which won Best Screenplay, and Bad Luck Banging, which received the Golden Bear in Berlin.
Starting last year, lots of film directors started to show content through OTT platforms. So for the first time at an Asian film festival, we have come up with an on-screen section that introduces series from OTT platforms.
This year's opening film was director Im Sang-soo's Heaven to the Land of Happiness, depicting the true meaning of happiness through the journey of 2 men, starring veteran actor Choi Min-sik and Park Hae-il.
Though death is a natural event, to that person and those nearby, it is horrible to face. As I grow old, I specifically began thinking about the death, and that was the starting point of this movie.
Out of all the characters in my filmography, Nam-sik is a very adorable character who I myself wanted to hug. I was touched by how he struggles, but manages to live his life.
Until October 15th, movie lovers, people from the film industry, and even globally recognized directors such as Bong Joon-ho will be in Busan to enjoy a film festival that has returned to near normal. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News, Busan.
We now know the winners of this year's Nobel Prize in Chemistry. German scientists Benjamin List and American David Macmillan have been awarded the prize for their work on building mirror image molecules. Their discoveries will help to lessen chemistry's impact on the environment. The technique can also be used in everything from new drugs to parts for solar panels. Yoon Jang-min reports.
This year's Nobel Prize in Chemistry has been jointly awarded to 2 chemists, one from Germany and one from the US. They developed new tools to build molecules that have helped make new drugs and are more environmentally friendly.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has today decided to award the 2021 Nobel Prize in Chemistry jointly to Benjamin List and David Macmillan for the development of asymmetric organocatalysis.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences says organic catalysts can be used to drive multitudes of chemical reactions. This means that researchers can make new pharmaceuticals and molecules that can capture light in solar cells more efficiently. The new generation of catalysts are more environmentally friendly and are cheaper to produce, key to making new substances such as pharmaceuticals, perfumes, and flavors. The winners share the 10 million Swedish kroner, or some $1.1 million in prize money. But because of the pandemic, the laureates were not present at the ceremony in Stockholm on Wednesday. Instead, the winners will receive them in their home countries in December. The prestigious award has been given to 187 established chemists worldwide since 1901. This was the 3rd Nobel Award of the season following announcements of medicine and physics prizes earlier this week. Awards for literature, peace, and economics will follow later this week. Yoon Jang-min, Arirang News.
Good morning. It's been umbrella weather in central regions this week, while the souths are having warmth and sunshine. And it looks to be a repeat of what we have seen, light rain to keep falling in central parts of the country. And do expect 5 to 20 millimeters of rain across central areas through the afternoon. The amount will not be much, but will make the temperatures stay on the cooler side again. And it's going to be as breezy as yesterday in the capital, while southern regions continue to have unseasonably warm temperatures, with temperatures going 3 to 5 degrees higher than the seasonal averages. Morning temperatures in most areas are beginning in the upper teens, which are similar to yesterday at 19 degrees in the capital. Sunshine to begin the day for those of you in southern provinces. The highs in Seoul will be at 22 degrees, Daegu will be 28, and it's going to be sunny all day, or in Busan going up to 27 degrees Celsius, along with strong UV rays during the day. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
That's all the time we have for this Thursday edition of New Day at Arirang. We'll see out the working week with you at the same time tomorrow. This was Kim Mo-gyan.
Yeah, and I'm Mark Broom. Thank you as always for tuning in. We appreciate it. We'll be back, I'll be back rather, on my own with another rundown of the news at 10 a.m. Korea time. That's in around 1 hour from now. Goodbye.